Alright, hello everybody. I've got a quick little tutorial for you and a free camera rig, so hopefully this will help you get started making a little bit more 3D games because it's been requested quite a bit. So to start, I just want to explain how this camera's working and why. I got the idea from like someone taking a selfie, I guess. So it has like a pivot point, which will be our character, so that's like our ground zero. There's a shoulder, so you could, theoretically, you should be able to tilt your shoulder up and down to get things on the ground or in the distance. You could bring your arm in closer or further away. Theoretically, your arm is forever long. Now, the other thing is that the camera does have its own look functions, where we could make it, stare at some orange point on the screen or in between. It just works better if we're looking at the player right now, because too many dependency cycles in that will work super easily right now. That needs a little bit tighter programming, I think. Regardless, okay. So I've drawn out the spatial structure here, and I've labeled them here, but I'm going to show you this right here. So should read. So here's the camera structure. There's the base, the arm, camera, which is, works pretty much as expected, I'd say. Down in here, we've got two nodes, the base, which, is obviously upright and tilted. So that is the y-axis one only. This, we can see, is tilted over its x-axis. And we will only continue to do that to it. And you can see that it only is affected on the x. And if we go to the base, you'll see it's only affected on the y. The hand, however, sometimes Godot will do weird things with the numbers. It shouldn't be rotated at all, and it should only be translated in the Z direction or Z. So you'll see that if I pull it with its, I've got local coordinates on right now. This is all local, so, it's just pulling it back and forth like that, right? So that should control the zoom. At least with the, the hand should be able to control the zoom. The camera should be relatively in place. Because there may be times where we want to go, okay, hey, like there's an event, change the camera from looking at the player to something else. But we still want to keep it in the same position so it's not so jarring, so we don't move the entire rig over. Maybe we just want to look at it for half a second. Okay, so that should explain the most part of it there. So it is just a chain of spatials, which is not too much to hold on to. But the concept being, I only, I want to isolate transformations. I want to use the fact that these other nodes are going to be affected by these, they're going to be going down the chain. So all, the hand, the shoulder, and whatever, because it's all like an arm, is going to act like an arm. So when you change it around, it's going to, change everything down the chain. So using that, if you know how you want things to work, you can say, okay, I'm going to use this to only affect the node this way, and Y rotation, or an X rotation. So this isn't made to be anything crazy. It's just kind of like, hey, keep the conventions of Godot in mind, and you could start making really powerful cameras. Like for what I mean is, this is a pretty useful camera because it's just got a lot of I could use it as an RTS if I want to lock, if I don't want it to rotate like this, I'll just turn that off. You can start using it like an RTS camera, and it'll follow, some player or something. Originally, I had it following this mouse target, but it kind of created a lot of problems where, because it's depending on the cursor to look somewhere, and it moves the camera when the cursor moves, then you're kind of like moving into the distance sometimes, and you can experience it with this. It'll sometimes, if you have it zoomed in and you do this, it'll send that off into the distance like really fast. It's because it's not grabbing it in world space. And there's a few interesting things going on with this. One interesting thing I think is the this little viewfinder. You're projecting it through the camera onto the world, which is kind of cool. And that's also how we were getting. You're able to get mouse clicks this way as well. The username as well, being able to find a place in 3D and then say, okay, here it is in 2D. That's also very interesting. So that's just an unproject, and I'll get to that in half a second. Um, the thing to keep in mind here is that you can architect your game however you want in Godot, and you don't have to shove this tree structure down your throat so much, but it's there and it's powerful. If you want to get around it by being a little bit more dirty, you still need to keep things in a tree, but I've just kind of made like a base one and it's not really relevant. So you can think of it differently. You don't need to think of it like it's in a tree, even though it is, I guess. So these will be all the ones relative to how the camera rig, how I want the camera rig to work. These are just child nodes, and I could use a string for these. But if I have the idea that I want to change the rig, and maybe I want to change, okay, now it's got an extra joint, or oh, I'm taking away the shoulder rotation, and I just want it to work like an RTS camera. Then I can take these out pretty quickly. The idea being I've exported them as node paths, and in there, then I can hook up all of the functions to certain nodes within itself. So it doesn't work out of the box. You do need to tell it sometimes what things are. For example, like it'll know about these itself default, but there also is a player and a target. So it'll follow the player around, as you saw. If I just move, it does follow the player. It's lerping, so it's got like a little bit of a delay, but it was nice for the time being. And it's got a target, which I was using to look at. However, I've just set it to this. It's just looking at the player. So you can switch out what node you want it to look at by changing this variable right there. Not really useful for me right now to change that, but that's where it is. So the other really useful things to note down here is that I'm returning a get node call, which it's not something that I see a lot often, but I just thought, hey, I'd do it anyways. The camera control is going to need to return the camera a lot, and the camera may, because I might want to change this rig around, it might be in a different place, so I don't want to use a string for that. I want to know where the camera is by default and just return it. And I don't want to have to go, okay, get camera control, get the camera control with the node path to the camera. I just want to have a function that's like, okay, I know where the camera rig is, and I want to get the camera. So, nice to have that. And that ties into other things, like the player needs to know where the camera base is for some functions. So it's nice to be able to drop that. So for example, when I'm talking about the username position, which is using something called an unproject, to find the username position on screen, I just say, okay, get the camera base, get the camera, right? No ridiculous strings are necessary to get the actual camera in use. And here is just like it's an unproject position. So it says, look at the point username position, which is, always going to be above your head, which is, I don't know, it's only a few units above, like something like that. Yeah. Take that out. Or no, I like that, like that. So it's just this little like position 2D units above his head. Nothing crazy. And then it's just saying, okay, get the, username position in global space, and when we're talking about a transform and we're talking about this origin, what we're talking about is this right here, is this local thing. So I know I'm saying, local, global, whatever. When we're talking about a transform, we're talking about this little box in here. This is a matrix, this grid of 3, and this is its own extra vector for translation. And you'll see that this is actually, because we're not rotating it or scaling, that this is actually just the translation of it. Once we start adding rotations in, it gets a little hairy. So you don't want to be typing in this yourself, really. But what you get when, say, get the global transform is now you're getting it in, with respect to everything else in the root node. So it's just going to say, where is this plus the player? In the scope of this, it's going to say, okay, the player's here. He's over here right now. The username is going to be right there. So it's going to say plus the player, or everything down the chain. In this case, just the player, but it'll still be above his head. Now, it's, yeah, so it'll just give us the location, scale, and rotation of that, and the origin is just the translation of that transform, not the origin of the grid. It's the origin of this local, if that makes sense. So when we're calling an unproject, it just says, look at this point and give me the 2D on screen position. So now we know where this point in 3D is on the screen. And luckily, since Godot lets you change things around, it's like it lets you compose 2D, 3D very, very easily. So you just say, yeah, I've got a 2D node in here and it's a username. Just get the position on screen of it and make the username go there. So it's nothing too crazy, but it's a feature that I think that some people might not have been using, and like text in 3D space is kind of quite useful. And it's only a 2-liner, so there you go. Yeah, and there's not too much to go into really. It's just like saying, okay, go to the player, look at the player, try to set the camera base to where the player is, and deal with the panning and rotations as the keys are pressed, and I've explained to you guys how that works. So if you want to go through here and tear it up, and by all means feel free. And I feel like you kind of need something maybe like this to get started on it. So yeah, either way, here's a free camera rig and a few scenes next to it to get you started, maybe making an RPG. I'm starting one myself, so I might start doing more tutorials on that. So I've got a few in mind. Hopefully this was helpful. See you guys later.